reverse tonight, in the sense that you have not seen the show yet, so it becomes a kind of invisible presence, a kind of ghost with the conversation. And Francesco starts with the interpretation, a very, I think, elaborate and very well thought through interpretation of the work as a whole. So you might have to, we have to take a few steps backwards to actually to maybe the factual, in the sense that you have interpreted through a sort of variety of experiences and a multiplicity of knowledges. And I think that already enriches the experience that you will have in seeing the show, hopefully, and possibly tomorrow. I think in that sense I should be your counterpart, and I see my role tonight as more sort of the interrogator and maybe the person who sort of provides a number of more factual things, in the sense that as you might see the show tomorrow, the core of it or the heart of it is the liquid archive. That's the thing that sort of generates the whole exhibition. And the liquid archive, I think you have to correct me if I'm wrong, Carlos, currently, because it's sort of ever expanding, or that's how it seems to be right now, a sort of possibly infinite structure. It consists of 2,300 images, and I'm continuously doubting, and I think maybe we might come back to that later on as well, whether I should call them images, forms, figures, emblems, symbols. I mean, their status is quite unclear, and I think that also relates to what Francesco has been saying, that we should mention about the abstract narration, or using abstraction in order to generate narratives. But as you will see, that so the liquid archive consists of these 1,300 digital things, let's call them. They're almost imaginary ideas that have been, through a computer process, turned into an image or a form or an emblem. And you will see that they are, you could maybe, for yourself, discover different categories in them. You will see a large number of animals, a large number of sort of, let's call them vegetal or botanical motifs. You will see imaginary creatures that are mostly hybrids. You will see sort of morbid abstract forms that are fragmented all the time. And all those images form a kind of visual vocabulary that is both the artist, but it also belongs to the people that he gives the permission to work with them. So they're kind, I see them as a kind of language, and that's maybe where I wanted to start, because in the show you will see that the liquid archive has different avatars. I call them avatars, it's a bit of a fashionable word now, but I think it's just a sort of, it's an incarnation of the liquid archive. And you already went through a number of them in the slideshow, but there's more. In the exhibition there's a series of collages, there's a series of paintings, there is the alphabetical categorization. It's a sort of paper representation of the archive in the form of objects. They are drawings, but I think they're also objects. And there's two films, one that you have in a way directed, and one that where you really delegated the creative responsibility that sort of came into existence without your interference. And I think that the liquid archive has a sort of almost, has an enormous potential to generate even more, may I use the word avatar? To generate a sort of infinite number of incarnations. So it might be that in 10 years you will see the work of Carlos Amorales and we'll still be dealing with the liquid archive. But maybe my first question would relate to the sort of, it's a sort of double question, and maybe the first part we can ignore and the second part you can reply to. Because as my background is I am not an art historian. I mean, I've been working in the visual arts for a number of years, but I studied literature and linguistics. And immediately, the thing that struck me the most is that you call it an archive. You don't call it a database, you don't call it a repertoire, you don't call it a collection, you don't call it a constellation of images, but you call it an archive. So there must be, that's maybe a point that we can come back to also, that how do you call these things? Are they images, are they forms, are they emblems, are they symbols? But another part is more maybe about the whole, because when I entered the show, it feels a bit like it's a sort of semiotic bomb, because there's so much potential in it that there's so much possible ways of reading this that you're completely thrown back onto your own framework. I think we have heard Francesco's interpretation. It comes very much also from his own cultural background and knowledge, and I felt like every single image, it's like an empty sign, because if I see the wolf, you immediately think, of course, the fairy tale, Little Red Riding Hood. You think of threat, danger, but you also think of Romulus and Remus, of the wolf as a kind of caring mother figure. And everything depends on actually your own background as a viewer, whatever you see in it. I'm a bit long-winded, but the point I wanted to come to is that I really see that the thing that you've created, the liquid archive, it's a kind of, I would call it persolect, or what we call it in linguistics idiolect, which is a personal dialect. It's a kind of contradiction, because any kind of dialect, any kind of language needs a shared community of people who know that language in order to function as a language. But the idiolect is a language created and used only by one person. And so I found it a very interesting tension that on the one hand it's your own personal vocabulary that is very cryptic and coded. We don't know what you mean with certain images. And on the other hand, you give it as a sort of, almost as a kind of visual Esperanto to other people, to use it as a tool to express their own message. So am I correct in seeing it as a sort of language, or?
It touches a lot, I think, language. And it has indeed a very personal part, or let's say I can also look at it and almost see it as a diary, or I can recognize the specific moments of my life. Because in a way I also develop it in a very intuitive way. Something also that happened with it is that it's not like one day I decided to form it and then I just work on it like for years until it's there. I actually became aware of it after 3 years of doing it. So, but I was not even aware that this thing existed. And what happened is just that I did all kind of different drawings, and then I thought it would be handy to kind of isolate the elements and start ordering them. And it's only until then that I became aware of it. And maybe it was just only 100 images by then. And then I started to really work on it. So I think it has something as a lot of a private idiom. But in another way, I've been reading a lot about fantasy and kind of horror stories. And so there are a lot of common cliches or common ground. So like people tend to you know, they become universal. Like the wolf for everybody is kind of, or mostly for everybody, is kind of a scary thing. So that's also when it can also